All right, 7:05. I think we're good to begin. So, Anshika, whenever you're ready.
Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you all for joining us today for our informative webinar about the face of college admissions in light of the COVID-19 crisis. Thank you everyone for coming, and I'd also like to extend a special thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today to provide additional insight on the topic. Without further ado, let's just get started.
So welcome everyone, we're really excited to have you all here. So we are the Palo Alto Youth Council bringing to you this webinar. We're a group of high school students working to service and resolve issues relevant to the teen community. The PAYC uses city funding to connect with the youth community and serve as a bridge between the city and teens in Palo Alto. Our team consists of 90 Palo Alto teenagers from Gunn, Valley, Castanea, Kahila, and Harker. My name is Julia.
My name is Anshika Agarwal, and I'm a junior at Gunn High School.
My name is Andrew Kim. I'm a junior at Gunn High School.
I'm Emily Chan, and I'm a sophomore at Castanea.
In the main aspects of our daily life, with this webinar, we are really hoping to reduce the confusion and alleviate the tension and stress that many teenagers, including us, are feeling about what college admissions will look like in the light of the current crisis.
The current state of Bay Area schools basically varies between different school districts, but generally, schools closed for the rest of the school year and standardized tests have been canceled for the rest of the year, with some additional testing opportunities in the fall. In terms of grading metrics, different schools around the Bay Area are each using different systems. For example, the Palo Alto Unified School District is going to be using a credit grading system. Other schools are using and some schools are also allowing students to choose which option they would like to use.
Next, so now we're going to quickly run through the webinar agenda. So we will start by introducing our guest speakers, and then we will next move to moderated questions for our panelists. And finally, the audience will get the chance to ask questions using the Q&A feature on the webinar, on the bottom of your screen. And if the questions come up throughout the panel, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to answer as many as we can.
To start off our speaker introductions, we first have Mr. Todd Collins, who is a member and current president of the Palo Alto Board of Education. He is also the father of 2 local high school students and now successful college graduates.
Our next panelist is Linda Kirsch. Linda Kirsch was first a community counselor providing mental health support and other resources at Gunn before shifting to work at the Gunn Counseling Department. She's been the post-high school advisor working with Leighton Lang in the College and Career Center for the past 4 years. She meets with over 400 Gunn families every year. She's had 3 girls who have all gone through the Palo Alto Unified School District system. 1 lives in Florida, 1 in Hawaii, and 1 5 doors away.
Our last panelist for this evening is Mr. Patrick Rounds, who is the Assistant Director of Admissions at Brown University. He's a 2015 graduate from Princeton, where he also began his career as an admissions officer. Additionally, he graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education last year, after which he began his role at Brown. In his free time, Mr. Rounds enjoys performing in community theater and playing instruments. Next, we will be moving on to the moderated questions segment of our panel, and I'll be handing it off to Emily.
Thank you so much, Anshika and Julia, for that wonderful presentation. So hi, I'm Emily again. I'm the secretary for the Palo Alto Youth Council, and I'm currently a sophomore at Castanea High School. And my co-moderator.
Hi guys. Once again, I'm Andrew Kim. I'm a junior at Gunn High School and first-year member of the Palo Alto Youth Council.
So we'd first like to preface all the questions by saying we would like to acknowledge that there are many uncertainties during this time, and we hope that this panel will be able to give students and parents more clarity on the coming years and college application process. So when we ask our panelists questions, we're not expecting them to have a definite answer, but most likely an estimate or inference. Now we'll start off with some questions directed at different panelists, but if others have knowledge on this topic, feel free to elaborate and jump in.
All right, just a quick note, parents and students on this webinar, if you have any questions, just feel free to type it in the Q&A chat box down below, and we'll do our best to get to them. So we'll start off, just to kick things off, a question open to everybody. So how will colleges evaluate standardized test scores for the upcoming 2021 admission cycle? So if anybody wants to take that.
It's going to vary. I listened to a panel last night of 3 different admissions peoples, and they basically have said that when they say they're test optional, they honestly are test optional. So by submitting your test scores, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a bump. Why they still need access to testing elements has to do a lot with merit scholarship elements. And that's where it stands. So if you take them, fine. And if you hear the word test blind, which was a new term for me, it means they absolutely positively will not be looking at any numbers.
Yeah, I think Linda hit the nail on the head. I think one thing I would say for some institutions, like I know in the Ivy League, I know that for example, Princeton, Brown, these institutions are still at this time requiring an SAT or an ACT. And if you submit both, they look at either one. It's possible that will change. We'll have to see. It really depends on how everything goes with the pandemic, what the testing options are. I think kind of a note or a theme that I think I would really like to emphasize is that we on this side of the table, when we're looking at your applications, we're going to be very, very understanding. We know that this is a very trying time for everyone. Although we may seem like we are not really people, but this like ethereal other entity, the admissions offices, we are people too. And you know, we're going through all the same things that everyone is going through. So we understand how difficult it is. And I guess a theme and a lot of the things that you know, if I pick up on questions, we're going to be very understanding and open-minded when we're looking at everything with your profile.
One add-on was somebody brought it to my attention that the University of California is indeed test optional for 2 years, but they told me that you're going to see that is not consistent with a lot of the other high-powered out-of-state publics. So you're getting information tonight about California, but we got to remember out-of-state publics can be different, and you'll be able to give us a lot of information on the private side of things.
Great. It's so refreshing to hear your insight. This question's directed at Mr. Collins. So we at the Palo Alto Youth Council, since the majority of us attend local Palo Alto high schools, we were just wondering, what could the school schedule look like for high school students coming into the 2021 school year? If you have any sort of kind of idea of how the new school year will look like.
I wish I had that crystal ball. That is a question that is uncertain on a lot of levels. We're not even certain that we will have in-person school in the fall, or if we do, when. You know, our governor suggested that maybe the schools should start in July, much to the surprise of basically every school board and superintendent in the state. And at the same time, our public health officer in Santa Clara County gave us guidance about a month ago that it wouldn't surprise her if it was as late as Thanksgiving. So the range is incredibly large. I mean, we used to talk about how dramatic it was if we started before Labor Day or after. Now the range is widened from July to Thanksgiving. And an interesting historical note, I did read recently that in 1918, during the Spanish flu, Pali High School, which had just been built, opened on the day after Christmas because they canceled school until after Christmas. So I think the range of outcomes is as uncertain as anything anybody's ever seen in their career or even lifetime. In addition, I think there's a lot going on with things like when we do open, what will the schedule look like? I think every school district in the state is wrestling with a number of scenarios that range all the way from 100% remote learning, which even if we don't start with that, we may go to that at times depending on local conditions and what the county public health officer requires of us, to things like 50% of the students on campus at any given time with blended learning and flipped class type arrangements, to I've seen proposals for kids coming in 1 day a week. So at their 20% of the kids on campus at any given time, to situations where we have most of the people on campus at any given time. So we are at this point the name of the game is developing scenarios and being flexible for the fall. And the guidance for this, I mean, people often ask, how do these decisions get made? The real answer for that is we're going to listen to the county public health officer, who is Dr. Sarah Cody, who is actually a Palo Alto resident, and actually alumni of Palo Alto Unified. And Dr. Cody is, her word is literally law in this topic. And if Dr. Cody says we can open, I'm sure we will try to open. But they will establish what the conditions are, including things like number of kids per classroom and how many people can be entering and leaving the building at any given time, and a whole host of issues around physical distancing and making sure that people stay safe. So, and the last thing I'll add is we are also going to see different bell schedules next year. I think the word has filtered out that Superintendent Austin has asked the two schools to align their bell schedules in order to facilitate remote learning and sharing of resources between the two schools as we go into this uncertain period. So I understand that discussion is ongoing and maybe approaching the point where there'll be an announcement. But I expect that both the bell schedules at both the schools will be different this year, in the coming year than they are this year. So I guess my answer is stay tuned. We'll find out. And if anybody tells you they know the answer, you can guarantee they're wrong.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I guess we can just keep our fingers crossed as of now. Hopefully everything goes well safe. Right now our Q&A box is filling up, so we'll do our best to answer all these. Here's the first one. So this is open to everybody. How do you look for the school's social life now, considering this situation?
Yeah, Andrew, so I'm guessing you're saying like kind of in the admissions process, looking at extracurriculars, that kind of thing. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying like on the social life of, like, sorry?
It's not clear.
No, Andrew, could you just clarify a little bit more with your question?
Yeah, this was a submitted question, so.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's another Andrew.
I'm sorry about that.
Would like to...
Yeah, so I guess because we can talk a little bit, I'll talk about very quickly, I guess, from the admission side. Again, the theme of understanding. We know that being, having to be in isolation, you really probably can't do much extracurricularly. So from the admission side, if that's the question in terms of what are they going to be looking for, again, they're really going to be seeing, if they see a gap starting in, February of 2020 going forward, I don't think that's going to raise eyebrows. So that's, I guess, a little bit from the admission side.
Okay, that's great to hear. Andrew actually clarified he was talking more of the vibe and the community of the campus. So I'm thinking, how do you look for what the school social life is going to be when applying?
So that's been addressed already on some of the feeds that I've received. Some are being very clear, like Purdue coming out and making a straight out, it's going to be quiet on campus. The fact that we're getting rumblings about how they're going to even house people on campus is telling you that there could be more kids pushed off campus, and that they will be doing crowd control. We'll not be seeing, we know we're not going to be seeing the football games in the fall, that kind of social stuff. So I think that the college campuses are basically warning students that this is not going to be your usual nightlife on the college campus.
Yeah, just to jump on that, I think there's definitely going to be a new normal. I think some of, at least here in Providence and Rhode Island at Brown, things that we're thinking about when it comes to athletic events is having no attendance at athletic events, or reduced and spaced out athletic attendance, something like that. When it comes to the arts, it could be if there's a theater performance, recording it or streaming it for students. I think one of the things that just has to be kept in mind is that most of the colleges and universities are going to really get creative with how they handle this and how they deal with this. Obviously, they want to provide students with the best campus social life that they can, short of what it was before. But I think the creativity, and I think they're going to look to the students too to help build that community, build that creativity. And certainly, it's not going to be like what it was before. But I think there's almost an opportunity in that when it comes to what you can create and what kind of new solutions you can come up with.
Thank you so much for your answer. So I'm looking at our Q&A box, and there's actually the same format of questions directed towards Mr. Collins, asking, when do you expect to come to a decision about the availability of summer school with an online format?
Oh, I think that decision's already been made.
It's already made. It is.
Go ahead, Linda, please go ahead.
That's already been announced to us, the guidance team, that it is happening and it will be fully online. We do not know how many classes they're offering.
Okay, perfect. Thank you
And
so
I
much.
do think, I know there's a school board member meeting on Tuesday evening, and there's going to be part of the presentation is plans for summer school. And I've seen the draft earlier this week. I saw the draft course list of what would be offered, and I imagine some or all of that will be shared at the meeting on Tuesday night.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, another question several people have asked is, what about SAT subject tests? Will they be required or recommended for certain subjects? This one asks, especially engineering or science subject.
Well, you're going to probably get two different answers. So you'll need to get something from me, and definitely we're going to have to hear from the private sector. But at the moment, the number of colleges in the entire United States that demands an absolutely you must do subject tests is about 4 of them. And I think with every year when I get new information, somebody else disappears from that. There is a collection of approximately 15 that would say we would like to, and Brown's in that little cluster, we would like to have you do some, and then they can be very explicit what they may want. When it comes to the folks telling me they're doing comp sci and engineering, I'm pretty clear on saying, though they don't require it, even the UC is very interested in seeing that the kids with comp sci and engineering have done a subject test, math 2, and something related to a science. That's it.
Yeah, and Linda, you're absolutely right in terms of that list shrinking every day, and actually Brown has shrunk even further, that it's just completely optional. It's not even encouraged anymore because, it's been a hurdle for some students in terms of being able to take that test, whether that's a financial hurdle or whatever it may be. We certainly don't want to discourage students. And this whole situation is just all the more reinforcement of why, if you're able to take them and you want to take them and you really want to show a proficiency in a certain area, that's wonderful. We're going to look at it, but it's not something that we are going to be required, nor is it even going to be something that if we're looking at your application, where are the subject tests? I know they're optional, but that's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge optional. It's not the case. It's definitely not. So they really are optional for most institutions. And again, coming from understanding, we really are not going to be critical with that.
Just a follow-up on, I'm just reading the Q&A box. If everything is optional or blind, won't this make the college admission process even more opaque than it already is?
Opaque meaning you're worried that somehow or other you're not sure what exactly you should do to get into college. There are going to be differences between your public venues and your private venues, and even within that spectrum, there's a lot of variability. Readers are going to be getting information from year to year that can change because you likely have the president has some idea of what he wants that college to be going forward with, and the board of directors probably feeds a few things, and that person is likely to then talk to the head of admissions and say, this year we might need to focus on this, that, or the other. And that's why there are many parents that would love a nice, clean 1, 2, 3 formula, but it just doesn't work that way. There is a lot of subjectivity in the essay reading that goes on. My biggest issue I've done when I do counseling, and I do it with family because then I have 6 ears instead of 2 ears listening to me, is to say, please give detail. What the readers want from you are not vague answers. I do a committee and then you say nothing about what you did. They want more detail about what you're doing with your free time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to the application, they're just, I guess, speaking from my experience at Brown and Princeton, which is the highly selective private, which is a whole different world. But just knowing from that piece that there are so many elements in the application that are being considered. These schools are, the highly selective institutions are all holistic admissions. Which means when they're looking at it, there are no cutoffs, no grades, no magic formula, no weighing. It's a very human process. So I think, I understand the root of the concern with the question, but we're trained and very experienced in reading thousands and thousands of applications. We can have a discerning eye. It certainly is. It's maybe one fewer piece of the puzzle that we have in front of us. But we're certainly going to be able to proceed as we do when it comes to that. And I'd also say that there are some pieces that are being added. So, for example, the College Board Common Application, they are looking into adding a question about the quarantine and describing your experience or obstacles you overcome. So start rolling that around in your head on possible essay answers for that. But even though there may be some pieces that were there before and are not there now, there are going to be other pieces that come into play to kind of fill that void.
All right, thank you for your thoughtful responses. Oh, Mr. Collins, did you have? Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
I was just going to say, instead of what did you do last summer, it will be what did you do during quarantine?
All right, thank you. So back to the Q&A box, we have a question from a attendee. How will students from this year's acceptance cycle deferring their admission to next year affect admissions to college, especially as the spots become reduced?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's going to vary from school to school. It really is, in terms of how they're proceeding, not so much how they're going to look at the applications next year, but how they're proceeding right now in terms of dealing with their gap year requests. And it's really going to vary. I know at Brown, this is a question we're constantly thinking of and that we're certainly heeding. I think right now we're in the thick of approving gap year requests. And historically we've really, for gap years, before this, before all this happens, we were really looking for legitimate, strong reasons why that was being pushed off. For example, plenty of students, if they're of Israeli citizenship, have to serve in the IDF for a year or two before coming. There are students who have health reasons. There's so many different reasons, but there always had to be a why. So I think a lot of schools are going to see this problem. They're going to see it on the horizon, exactly what you're describing. That, if we approve all these gap year requests, then what are we going to do for the next class? I certainly think it's all these institutions are heeding that and thinking about that. So they're going to be pretty discerning, I think, when it comes to approving gap year requests, would be my opinion.
And this is going to be the difference between, again, public and private. Those schools where when kids take a seat, they stay put, period. There has been a growing trend in the past couple of years where what has happened was I started to notice that kids were coming in telling me that they got an admission letter as a sophomore. That really threw me off. And I thought, why could that be? Well, it was that there was enough kids leaving somewhere in freshman year that they had enough holes that they wanted those holes plugged. So they actually gave you the offer that you would arrive as a sophomore and you could do freshman year any of a variety of places. Some schools were much more specific than the other. I also announced to everybody as they came in for their conferences this year, you have finally hit the best year of doing this college process in your life, because for the first time in the United States, the birth rate has gone down. And I said, finally, you guys are going to be very wanted and valued. And when you add to that with the coronavirus, you have people that left the country and will not be able to re-enter, and that colleges have been spending a lot of time and energy trying to recruit and fill spaces that belong to people from other countries. They are now having holes in their collection of not just freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So this is throwing the people that are called enrollment management into they have to figure out how to fill the incoming freshman class, but then what do they do about those other holes? So even if you do have deferrals, the way in which the trends are with what is going on in colleges today, boys aren't going to college as much as they did in years past. Boys, I'm getting this from Claremont McKenna came out and said, and they'll leave quicker than the girls will. So pockets of holes will emerge. There is something called summer melt. No matter how hard these guys work to fill that class, somebody is not going to show up in the fall. So there are holes that then reemerge again. And then there are always people who simply decide in the middle of the year that they're going to leave. So I'm a little less worried that even if there is some pulling back, there will be plenty of seats in schools in the United States. And your ability, if you're not happy where you are, to go someplace else, you'll never have been at a better time in life to be able to make contact with a school and say, any chance you've got a seat for me, and be able to pick that up. Because I already saw that starting at the start of this year, where a youngster was positioned in the fall in a school, couldn't get classes they wanted, and said, enough of that. Called up some other school that had taken him, but he had turned down, said, any chance I can still come? Yep, come along, and away he went. So I'm a little less worried about that.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. So this question is directed to Pat. So you said previously that the admissions committees will be forgiving. I have a 10th grader at Gunn currently and will be applying fall of 2021. Do you think that an admissions committee will still be forgiving or as forgiving 2 years out from now? Those students will have C/NC on spring 2020 on their transcripts.
Yeah, great question. And the answer is absolutely. I think these schools, again, it's not just this coming class. It's going to be tied to this time. And really, seeing, taking from the spring of 2020 and moving forward until as long as this goes before we return to normalcy. I think that kind of forgiving, I don't even think forgiving, more understanding perspective is going to be certainly in place. So definitely not something that that if you have even younger students should be concerned about.
I saw an article that I shared with the panel organizers earlier today that I think Pat would identify with. It was an interview in Forbes magazine with a set of college admissions officers, and the title of it was "We Get It." And the thrust of the article was they understand that not only are grades going to be funny, but extracurriculars are going to look strange, sports participation, what courses you're able to take, whether courses are available because you may not be able to get the courses that you want. I think they understand that this is an unusual period because they're experiencing it exactly the same way you are at their institutions. So I think as long as this goes, everyone's going to be very aware that these were special circumstances, a truly extraordinary time. And the admissions committees, they get it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Okay, here we have another question. Without standard test scores, do you think that schools will change focus on the school applicants?
So yeah, I can jump in. Again, from my perspective, from the highly selective institutions, we don't know yet if they're going to be score optional. But I do think, kind of what I was saying before, from our perspective, that we have so many pieces that we're able to look at. Yes, it will change the perspective a bit, but what I would say when it comes to my experience, for the students who score really well, they're typically excellent students in the classroom. So those typically aren't mutually exclusive. We're going to look at it for a little bit longer than we typically do. But when it comes to academics, we're going to see, whether there are standardized tests, whether they're optional, whether there are none, there will be other pieces that we will be able to pick up and look at and be able to really get a grasp on your proficiency.
These schools know us. They don't need to rely on standardized testing the way it was when that test was invented many, many years ago. It was designed when they didn't know what a gun high school and a Castellea were. We were the other side of the country. Who were these people? So they needed a test to normalize and equalize students. As time moved on, and it turns out it's the 90s apparently when Kaplan got busy and started producing test prepping. Once you've added test prepping to the mix of things, you don't get the same kind of value out of that testing that was once very useful to the admissions population. And there have been people like MIT who's posted in the Globe the issue of they would get kids where they'd have an 800 and they couldn't do the entry-level math. So it's not going to be you're very deserved because this is not available. These people who read thousands and thousands of applications have a very good sense from what you're saying about what you do and how you write those essays, because they pick questions they want you to answer for their institutions that are very relevant. And some places, and it may not be the Ivy League, but other selective institutions spend a lot of time these days now checking technology to see whether you have demonstrated interest for them. Did you bother to go to a fair, request materials? And in recent times, I've been told they can actually track what you did via website. And if so, what will you give out a bunch of Office of admission if you really did nothing more than throw a dart at the Common App wall and say, I think I'm going to apply to these schools. They need to have a sense or a feel that you does oral interviewing, which is another element that goes in play with certain schools. Maybe you could speak to that.
So are you saying me, Linda?
Yes.
Or yeah. So I know Brown and Princeton as well. They don't track interest. That is something that they exclude because it's just already just such a competitive. There are so many pieces already. But Linda's absolutely right. I know the technology is there. I have seen it, and she's absolutely right that there are plenty of schools that are going to look. Even so much as emails, whether, if an email blast is sent out, did you open it? And if you have a portal, how many times did you log in? And how many times are you uploading pieces, polishing pieces? So it's definitely there. Some institutions will willingly not look at that, but it's absolutely there for the institutions that do want to look at that.
Yeah, just to chime in, I mean, this is my business perspective. I mean, college is a very competitive business from the provider's point of view. We think of it as we're pleading for them to take us. They think of it as they are desperate to get customers and to get the highest ranking they can. And this isn't necessarily applying to all colleges or especially to the highly selective, high reputation colleges, but the vast majority of colleges in America are competing for students. And so for them, the college admissions process is basically a direct marketing process where they're reaching out to students and trying to figure out not just who is going to apply, but who will actually come. Because the problem for them is if a lot of kids apply and then they admit them and they don't come, that screws up their whole admissions process because now they got to keep going down their wait list and hoping they can find kids who are still available to fill their spots. And two, it puts them in an awkward position where it looks like their yield rate, the number of students they admit to the number of students who come, is low, which makes them look less selective, which is less appealing to future classes. So for them, you should be aware of that as you think about your interactions with colleges and how you, I guess, play this game. I mean, it's funny because when I went to college a generation or maybe even 2 generations ago, I think there was still this idea that, you were finding the right college for you. It was like getting married. You find the right college for you, and you're supposed to not think about, the financial aspects or any other aspects. It's a business, and they're looking for customers. And, you need to be wise to that. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be thoughtful about what colleges you should go to the college that you think is right for you, but just be aware of how admissions is a competitive process from the college's point of view. And they want to make sure that they got kids who are actually going to come if they get admitted. Linda, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That business component you brought up is very relevant. There was an article that also referenced the fact that if they get a bad return on the number of Office of Admission to the number of rejection, it actually ends up costing them money. Bonding agents apparently then raise their rates on what they're going to have to pay for money. It's business. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that gets missed.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kearse, Mr. Collins, and Mr. Rounds for your insight. There's a question about interviews, but I can't seem to find what happened to it. Will alumni interviews still be available for the applicants? And if they are, how are interviews going to be worked out?
Oh, that's a good question for Patrick because they're just beginning to reference in a meeting I saw yesterday. They didn't even know how they were going to come to the campuses to visit because normally we get visitation starting in August and they don't know if they'll be on campus at all next year. They will definitely do more on virtual and they claim that they will make themselves more available. I would have to assume that interviews are going to be done much like what we're doing tonight. But Patrick, do you have any, nobody's spoken to that point directly.
No, Linda, you're absolutely right. I think something that, at least from Brown and Princeton, what we've seen is that often for international applicants or students who were distance, I'd say a lot of the Midwest, where students are kind of really spread out and an alum might not be local to their area, that already these offices have been using Skype, phone interviews. That's all been used quite a bit. So, my guess is that that's just going to become the normal, instead of that being a bit more of the few in the pool. That's going to be pretty much all of them. And they're going to get flexible. They're going to get creative. I know our office, we already have a virtual tour. I know that we're working on a virtual information session, so that these resources are out there for all of you to see and kind of get an idea of the school. And we totally understand that that's not the same as going on a campus and being on a campus and experiencing it, but just, we're going to try and get as close to that as we can. And most of that's going to be, again, through virtual resources.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, I actually have a follow-up from one of our Q&As about about the question earlier. For Pat, how important are alumni interviews reports for admission officers? And then they go on to say, I hear at Princeton almost 35,000, 99.9% of candidates are interviewed.
It's true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's a completely optional component. I know as an alum at Princeton and also having worked there, that they do get close to 100%, quite literally, when it comes to alumni interviews. Again, I guess going back to a great point that Todd was making, though, you have to see kind of further beyond that, and almost as like a business kind of thing. As much as important as it is to have that contact with the student and to provide some information for the admission office, which it's a piece of the puzzle, but a very, 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 very small piece of the puzzle, I would say. As much as it's a way to do that, it's also a way to engage alumni. It's a way for alumni to volunteer. It's a way for them to be proud of their institution and stay in close contact with their institution. I know that is something that Princeton is obsessed with, is grooming that alumni sphere. So as it has been a piece, and it has been, I would never say, having read thousands of applications and gone through committee and decision-making processes, I know for a fact it's not a deciding factor. When it comes to an application, I can't even think of an example where the alumni interview was what decided what happened with that application. For the most part, it's often confirming what the admission officer is already seeing in the application. And the vast, vast majority of them are positive, very positive, usually. It's very rare that we come across an interview that is negative. And it really, it's a way, again, it's a platform for you to kind of express a little more in that way. Sorry if I was kind of rambling, but that's a great question. But those are, I think, some of the elements to it.
Let me just add, as an avid alumni interviewer for my alma mater, first I'm crushed to hear that my great insights are not the deciding factor in the admission folders for the students that I've interviewed over the years. But I'm not surprised. I know that I've been doing this. I've been interviewing students for, going on 20 years now. And the number one thing I've noticed is that the college wants us to write less and less about our great insights about students, to where now for my school, it's basically reduced to a checkbox form where you can add optional notes. And the number one thing I'd say they were looking for, to build on something Pat said, is if there's something different that didn't get expressed in the application. That's what I always encourage students to talk about when I meet with them. It's like if it's in the application, the reader's already seen it. I mean, there's no point in repeating it to me. Think of me as another way of getting another piece of paper that maybe is a different perspective than what you've said before. And so I encourage people to say, if there's something you didn't feel comfortable saying or didn't know how to say or it's changed, then this is a good opportunity to say it, because I'll write it down and send it in, and then they'll evaluate it. But I think sometimes I feel bad because I think sometimes people place weight on the alumni interview, and my experience is, like Pat said, it's I can't think of a negative alumni interview that I've written. I've probably written 150 over the years. But I think it's a good chance to meet an alumni from the school and to, and if you have something that you want to say that didn't make it into the application, to add that in.
So we actually have a lot of questions still open in our Q&A box, and we were wondering, panelists, if it would be possible so the event was supposed to end at 8 p.m. and we were wondering if it would be possible to instead end at 8:15 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Fine.
Would that be okay? Great, thank you so much, because we have so many questions and we want to get through all of them.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we'll go pretty quick trying to get through all of them. Our next question is open for any of the panelists. This is for the current sophomores. So how much will colleges weigh our grades next year, sophomores, considering that online learning might have been hard for many students and many might not be at their best next year?
Well, Palo Alto Unified is doing credit, no credit. That doesn't give college much to look at. I fully anticipate, and Patrick may tell me if I'm wrong on this, that they'll be doing a workaround. In other words, they can look at how did you do in freshman year, how did you do in sophomore year, how was the first semester of your junior year, and I would speculate, and this is just me, that they might take a very close look at how you do when you return to school and you go back to a grading cycle to see how you do with transitions. So that is one of the reasons that I think it's good for us to say, study hard now, because you're going to need to be able to come back and be ready to go in the fall. And so, there's speculation from some sources about whether there could be fewer schools going early decision, maybe wanting more information from first quarter grade marking. All those up for grabs. We don't have firm information.
Yeah, I have little to add. I think Linda hit the nail on the head. We will be looking at the other grades. We're going to be looking at all the other pieces, as I've been emphasizing. And when it comes to the S, I know that there's a lot. I know this wasn't explicitly in the question, but we've been at Brown's admission office. We've been getting a lot of questions about, are we going to look at that negatively if a course is satisfactory, no credit, because there are some institutions that are still doing letter grades, and is that going to put anyone at a disadvantage? And for us, certainly the answer is no. And I suspect for most institutions that the answer is going to be no. But Linda's absolutely right. I think once you do get back to that grading, that normalcy, and getting back into the grading, the letter grading, definitely get on your horse and be ready to get on your horse. She's absolutely right.
Thank you so much for your answer. This next question is directed towards Mr. Collins. Is the district preparing to provide synchronous online classes in the fall?
Sorry, I lost the last part of that. Synchronous
sorry.
Online classes
In the fall.
In the fall.
Yeah.
Well, as I said before, I don't think we know what the fall is going to look like yet.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's some synchronous learning going on now. I think there'll be more in the fall as the teachers and the the infrastructure are set up to handle it. So we're definitely planning for remote learning scenarios in the fall, and I know synchronous learning will be a part of that.
Okay, here we have another question specified towards art school applicants. So I don't know how much you guys can go upon this one, but recommendations for art school applicants in general.
A letter of recommendation, or is it this? This concern was referenced earlier today at another meeting I was at, where people were saying, how are we going to be doing our submissions? Well, I think they're going to be okay with submissions, but where they normally would have big events to have you go to be able to be seen acting or singing or something, I think that's going to be all online submission for that kind of thing. And with art schools and art students, they do need their art teacher to also do a letter of recommendation, because the art teachers will use the lingo that's needed to make sense to the recipient who's reading things for that department at the college to be able to make decisions. That gets looked at quite differently.
Thank you so much for your answer. So the next comes from the Q&A box. Considering that some students may take a gap year from college this year and join next year, how will this change admission for the class of 2021?
Yeah, I think we had something similar to this question before. So again, I think Linda was explaining there are all these different ways that students can not really be in the class and meeting students. And, as I was saying, gap year requests, every school is going to look at it differently, and they're definitely going to keep that question in mind in terms of proceeding with those. Oh my God, cute dog.
He likes to listen to Zoom meetings.
Adorable.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Here we have another question. How would CSUs evaluate applicants if there are no essays or standardized tests? Not to mention that GPAs will be all over the place.
Yeah. So with that question again, I think what we've been talking about, looking for information where we can find information. So we're going to be looking at your grades before all of this. We're going to look at the grades after, once they return to a typical grading policy. And I think that is a little bit of a signal, I would say, to really polish and really take your time with the other pieces of the application. If I'm saying that we're going to be looking at other parts, that means with your essay, really take your time with your essays. Really get across whatever you want to get across that maybe you would have gotten across with your transcript or with your scores. Like, let's say if you're just all about math and you love math, and we would have seen that you're just killing it in math in your courses and in your testing. If we don't have that, talk about it. Just talk about how important it is to you and how much you care about it. And that's going to be used in the process, again, with the highly selective admissions institutions that I'm kind of talking about. It's a very human process. Again, there's no magic formula. So having pieces missing from the formula, there's no formula. So really, it's going to be a human process, and I'd say really focusing and spending your time and devoting your energies to the other pieces is important.
And it's all not about the numbers. If you had a math person the way you're describing, and I know we're talking to many different schools tonight, but I also look at that kid, and when I've been interviewing with them to say, what do you do with free time, meaning your extracurriculars, I'm listening for, did you do math circles? Were you involved with some club or activity or competition? Because that's going to be equally relevant when you're looking at certain candidates. Did they get into the kinds of activities that the kids who say they're very serious about it, that they've done something? So the engineers, sometimes it's the robotics club or robotics competitions. So that backup information is relevant. It's not just as simple as a number on a page. And I don't know how many ways we can say that, but that's really holistic means that you're synthesizing many pieces, which is why I stress as much as I do detail in what you're doing with free time. Are you spending all of this time gaming every day where you will get gaming as the predominant, or did you find some ways to be creatively exploring via magazine articles that you have read, or the TED Talks you're going on to, or you a NOVA program where it covered a particular element that feeds to what they're trying to tell you that they want to be studying on your institution. So I like the word curiosity over passion, because I think that that's a way of saying there's more variety of what you do with your free time. And that could be reading fiction. It does not have to be reading a math book or trying to do an extra class that's college level instead of simply taking good care of your current high school needs in growth and development.
Actually, Mrs. Kirsch, do you think you can expand on that as more directly for CSU's process?
Okay, so CSU is very different because it has no essays, and it is strictly going to be taking, they are test optional also, and by golly, when you are a state school system, you are under some very different rules. And what is the rule for the state of California, I need to remind people repeatedly, does not apply to Oregon or Arizona. They treat their systems very differently than California. California has a tiered system. If you don't have a 3.0, you're not eligible for UC. Whereas when you have University of Arizona, Arizona State, they simply apportion what they're offering on what campuses where they feel like, and that's very different. So they have laws. That's why I've sometimes wondered when we didn't get kids into some of the high flyers, say University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill doesn't tend to seem to parlay out. I've asked directly, do you have laws that prohibit the number of out-of-state kids you're allowed to take? And sometimes I get told, oh yes, we're only allowed X percentage. And another time they'll say, no, we can take what we want. It's just, for whatever reason, they aren't particularly pulling from our area.
Awesome. So another question we have is that traditionally the percent of freshmen coming from early decision has increased over the years, with some schools taking a majority of their students for the incoming class from ED. Due to COVID-19, do you expect these percentages to be different next year?
I would have to say that that is one that could absolutely change. There are schools that do fill, we've tracked it, up to 60% of the kids getting taken in early decision. The issue with early decision that's a tough one to make is they know you want them, so they can set the price tag where they want. And when you are given an early decision, you are not supposed to be trying to then wiggle out and finagle to get someplace else. So rule of thumb, it's very harsh to break an early decision contract, so you have to be very careful. But will they stick with that? That one is under debate at this particular time. I think they have to see more what their yield is going to be. And normally they do the May 1 selection, and then within a month to 6 weeks, they're pretty much done with this and they can take a break. This year, they're telling us they're pretty sure they're going to be stuck doing and filling classes all through the month of May, June, July, and some speculated August before they're done. So this is also shaking things up, because I've already had kids say, oh, good, I came off a wait list. Oh, good, I came off another wait list. So they were just about to respond to one, and then suddenly somebody else came through that maybe I really like them better. So it's really tricky this year, but I don't think that's going to be quite the same in subsequent years. Interesting movement pieces going on here. So ED is simply not one of those. We don't know whether they'll go more to early action or whether there'll be more presence of early decision 1, early decision 2, because some kids looked like they were more happy with the idea of going ED2 and having a little longer time to think about whether they wanted to make that firm tie to that institution.
Thank you so much for your insight. So our next question is about letters of recommendations. And Luke says, letters of recommendations are also going to be impacted for current juniors, especially if school starts in the fall. If school start in the fall is delayed, they're losing a significant chunk of time where relationships with teachers are developed to get a strong letter of recommendation. Any suggestions on how to approach this?
Well, this is one of those instances where we've had kids who wanted a letter of recommendation, the teacher was gone. And sometimes you really needed that math or you needed a science. The best you can do is be able to explain in your application that happened, that teacher that was going to write the letter has gone. But you can definitely approach your teacher, because we go back so early. If we continue to go back in August, you can talk to a new teacher in senior year and say, can you keep an eye on me over the next 8 to 12 weeks or so? Your first marking period at Gun is October. So if you keep an eye, a teacher could watch you and know what things they would like to look at in order to be able to write a letter of recommendation. And if you took a general topic like math or science, they could ask you to also talk to one of your other teachers to also give additional information about you as the science person or the math person. And that still will come together with the detail that would be necessary for an institution to read you adequately. Now, Patrick may have something to add to this.
Yeah, I think something to keep in mind too is that everyone is dealing with this situation, and everyone is in the same boat when it comes to this. And it's not like, students, I'm sure you know this, you're not twiddling your thumbs right now. You're still learning, you're still working diligently, and there is distance. It's not the same. Again, it's not going to be the same in terms of developing that relationship with teachers, but they're still reviewing your work. They're still getting to know you through your work, especially through, I would say, your writing, and you're going to still be interacting with your teachers. Again, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be a new normal, but it's going to be a new normal for everyone. So really, I don't think there should be too much anxiety when it comes to building that relationship, because there aren't any students in this country or this world who are building the relationships in the same way that they were last year.
Thanks, Pat. Seeing that we have around 8 minutes or so left, it doesn't look like we'll get through all the Q&A, but we'll do our best. Next question is for Mr. Collins. So why did PAUSD choose to do credit, no credit grading system rather than optional letter grades?
Wow, I won't take up too much time with that because it's been addressed in a lot of other forums. I think the most important reason is to give a fair shake to all the students throughout the district who all of a sudden found themselves in very different learning situations. As I think the saying everybody's heard at this point is, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we're in our own boats. And our boats are different. And so I think the determination was made that given the different circumstance, school, when people come to school, the playing field's more level. When you're at home, everybody's situation is going to be quite different. So I think that was the number one consideration that informed the decision, and that's the decision we've made.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. Thank you so much for your insight. So how are tuition rates going to be affected given that companies like Sallie Mae will probably be less willing to give out loans because of COVID-19?
Tuition rates. That's a good one for Patrick to start with.
Yeah, so I wish I had the authority and the pay grade to really talk about all my plans. That's a great question. It's a great question. Kidding aside, it's really gonna vary. I know that that institutions like Brown and the Ivy League are in very fortunate and privileged positions where I think they're still going to be able to offer. Although Ivy League doesn't offer merit scholarships, it's just need-based financial aid. And if I were a betting man, I would say it's not going to be affected because they have. But you're right. It's really going to vary. So for students who need assistance when it comes to tuition, they should be all right. But I think that's an excellent question. Is that if an institution is offering only distance learning and virtual learning, I'm assuming that the tuition is going to be cheaper, I would hope. And you're certainly not going to be paying room and board, but that may be just wishful thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, that has not been verified yet. There have been kids already saying, I don't want to pay the same price if everything's going to be virtual. You have to factor in where the virus has hit hard in a state. This is where looking at that, what they call the measles map, and tells you how much this virus, a place like Montana, for example, has had a grand total of 500 cases, and that was that. So they're going to behave very differently. They are not being impacted like the state of California, where every dime we've had has gone out. We're housing the homeless. We're taking care of all the public health needs. And we have gone through large swaths of money. And even in the newspaper tonight, they came right out and said there's going to be not a lot of extra money there to be going to schools. So you need to be looking at what some of the outgoing seniors might give us some feedback on how has school changed on a given campus, and not assume that it's going to be exactly like it was before, because as they cut corners, it could be that some of the amenities that have picked up are now going to go away, and they will have a price tag for entry. And they always have a tuition, and room and board is different. And I noticed on reading something yesterday, a little like kind of a miscellaneous. It had a general term, but even the cost of healthcare looked pretty steep to me when I was reading that being as another add-on. So the concern is going to be, will the costs be the same every year, or every year that you're there, are they going to raise the price? And that's something you should be able to ask your admissions folks, because many colleges know whether there could be changes from year to year and how they're going to tweak some of those changes, including your room and board fees are going to be, if they have to do only one person per room instead of 2 or 3, then the cost of your dorm is going to change. And that expense is a sneaky side thing, because some kids were told already, oh my goodness, this is California, this is going to be expensive living off campus around there. So this is a very tricky question. What's going to happen with the price tag I get today versus the next 4 years?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think in this, again, this theme of, college as a business. On the one hand, I think colleges are, so I think the reality is most, Brown and some of the other colleges with very strong endowments are in a different situation from the vast majority of colleges in the United States, which are getting crushed. Just crushed. I mean, this is a terrible, just so like every other business in the United States is getting crushed, except for Zoom, I guess. These colleges are getting crushed. And they're not seeing and a lot of their revenue streams are drying up. They're not seeing the kind of, they have great uncertainty about their ability to collect revenue next year. And it's not like these guys have billions of dollars in the bank just to sit back and let it go by. These are people that need to balance their budgets. So on the one hand, they're going to be looking to collect money from students. On the other hand, they've got to get students to come.
Right.
And if the students don't come, it doesn't matter what you want to charge because they're not going to pay it. So I think we're in a period of the next couple of years that we've never been in before for both the colleges and the students. And I think there's room for I think that means that students need to be attentive to this, and families need to be attentive and try to figure out. You may find that there are some colleges, like Linda said, some colleges that are much more willing to negotiate than others. And you have to kind of feel that out and engage with the colleges to figure out what your opportunities are.
That sounds good. So we've also been seeing a lot of questions about AP tests. So just to summarize, will AP tests have will AP tests be more emphasized on, and how will they be evaluated differently in comparison to scores from previous years?
I wouldn't expect that they're going to be different. When you took an AP class, the expectation has always been that colleges wanted you to take the AP score, and the AP score may have helped to contribute to why subject tests aren't as needed as they once were, because they could read from an AP score, which is given in a very controlled setting, and it was equal across the spectrum who takes it. It's not like you paid buku bucks for a specialty program to be able to pass your AP exam. So I think they're going to look at APs like they have, and then some schools do allow you to cash them in, and that means that you could have space to be able to graduate early or have a double major or major and a minor. I mean, they have a high value in different ways for different schools. Ivy Leagues do not give you that you're going to be able to cut corners and not take a class, because whereas the UC makes it very available for you to cash that in and go from a 4-year to a 3-year cycle. So I don't see how that's going to make a difference. I've also watched enough years of this to see kids come in from other states, and sometimes they had A's and they had lots of APs and they had very low AP scores. That's often a reflection of the way in which education was taught. At Palo Alto Unified, we generally see pretty solid scores on APs, and it sort of affirms for the college that we're still doing business the way we should, in the high quality way that we do.
Yeah, I think Linda's absolutely right. The only thing I will add for the Ivy League, it's true that you aren't able to use it to graduate early or, substitute credit, but it certainly is valuable in the way that Linda's described in terms of the admission process and looking at the AP scores. But you can also use it for a higher placement. I know that at Princeton and Brown, if you come in with a bunch of AP 5s in your pocket, and you sit down with your academic advisor that first fall, you're not going to be starting intro classes. You're going to be able to jump ahead. And oftentimes what that means is you either get to study a subject you're passionate about in a more nuanced and complex way, or like Linda's describing, it frees up space for you to take some other courses and maybe do a little more academic exploration than you thought you were going to be able to do. So they're certainly extremely valuable wherever you go.
Okay, thank you guys for your input. We are running a little bit late on time, but as a final question, many of us are wondering, what do you think about Ethan Kim and his video? You may not be familiar. I'll give you a little background. Ethan Kim applied this year to Harvard and was deferred. So he made a rap video called Harvard, Please Let Me In. So does something like this help or hurt a candidate?
Oh, Patrick, you've got a lead. You've probably had some wonderful little stories.
Yeah.
Can you be bribed?
So it's a gamble. It's a gamble. Something like that is a gamble. I'm going to be honest. I'd say most institutions, if you were to poll them, they're probably not going to encourage you to try something like that. When it's done in a really inventive, creative way, fantastic. It can be something that's really unique to that student. I know at Brown, for example, there's the interview, or you can submit a video portfolio. And there were some really creative portfolios that we saw. There was a student who wrote a whole rap that was like, I guess it sounds similar to Ethan Kim, but and that was fantastic. But there are plenty of students that will try something. You just never know who's going to be looking at your application. There may be someone who loves Kanye, and if you did a Kanye like parody, they're going to be all over that. and then there could be someone who has no idea who Kanye is. And, so it really, it's tough. I certainly personally, I wouldn't say, yes, go do it, find something crazy and weird to do. But, it's a gamble. And, at the end of the day, I think it's just, you have to be true to yourself. And if that's something that you're like dying to do and you just have to do it, go for it. But it certainly shouldn't be something that like, man, I don't have some wild aspect of my application. I need to go find some earth-shatteringly different way to do things. One of the things that I like to say, I guess kind of tying to essays, one of the best essay I ever read was a student writing about, and you can't do this in Palo Alto, but was writing about shoveling snow. And it is the most mundane, boring thing you could write about, and the student made it fascinating and was writing stream of conscious about what his mind was doing while he was shoveling snow. So you don't need to look to do something wild, crazy. It can be whatever you're emphasizing. You just need to be true to yourself and make sure it's your voice that's coming through. So if that's a rap about Harvard, please let me in. Great. If you feel that's not your voice, don't force it to be your voice.
I really like that answer. Our superintendent is, one of his favorite phrases is, you do you. And I find that true not only in college admissions, but in life. And I think people figure out who you are, try to figure out the best you can who you are, and try to express that in your application. And I remember my daughter, who's now 25, when she got into college, she got into some colleges, didn't get into other colleges. And her conclusion at the end was, the people who I really liked me back. And I thought that showed that she had done a good job, that she had kind of been true to herself and expressed who she was. And some places that was a good fit, and other places that it wasn't. And that worked out.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your time. I know we went a bit over, but I just want to say thank you again. You've been super informative, and we really appreciate you coming to our panel to talk. Andrew, would you like to add something?
Well, I just found out Ethan was rejected, but he did go viral, so there's a win for that. And yeah, thank you guys for your time. Yeah, we, like Emily said, we did go a bit over, but yeah, I had a great time.
Thank you all for your time. Your insight was very informative, and I'm sure that everybody learned something new from the panel, so thank you.
I'm sure I'm speaking for Linda and Pat. I mean, you guys did a phenomenal job organizing this. This was a great format. I'm really impressed how many people came and sat through and participated in the whole thing. So thank you very much for organizing it. This was great.
Any questions that have been left unanswered, I'm more than happy. I don't care what school you belong to. If you've got a question, if you send it to Kirsch, and we're all at pausd.org, I will find a way to be able to make a reply to that, okay?
Right, if panelists want right now, they could put their email down in the chat box for anybody who's still on the call, if they'd like. And to June, yes, this webinar has been recorded, so we'll make that available afterwards.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for organizing. This is it was great to speak to you all. I'm going. It's let's see what time is. It's 11:30 out here in Providence, so I'm probably gonna crash. But certainly, I would definitely encourage. Shameless plug for Brown. It's a fantastic institution. If you are looking to apply and have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me at my email. But again, like I said, colleges we're going to be so understanding. Admissions offices, we are going to be understanding. I think the most important thing at this point is just staying healthy and staying sane and dealing with all the obstacles that life is throwing at you right now. And just know that the admission offices, we are going to be understanding when it comes to looking at things that are different than the past, but different isn't worse. It's a new normal. So, but thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and panelists for organizing this youth council. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming. I think I'm going to end the meeting now. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Sorry, Pat, for keeping you so late.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.